seen a theatrical presentation of the shtetl. This is what we see out of our bedroom window and kitchen window. And
nice view from the shtetl.
This is the shtetl New York style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shtetl New York style. We live at the foot of the Williamsburg Bridge. The red building is next door to us and is exactly the same as our building. If you look at those terraces on the top there, we would be the second terrace from the top. So,
and we watched the Life on the River. We took this shot because this looked like it might crash into the bridge, so we were curious about that, just so you know.
All right, this is the view from our front windows, uptown New York. So we definitely know we're in the middle of New York City. These buildings, by the way, have an interesting history. They were built by the labor unions in cooperation.
Built by who, Doug? I didn't hear that.
And they were intended to give all working people decent places to live. Many of the people who reside here are now in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s, and some of them have never lived anywhere else but in these buildings, which are cooperative buildings. So uptown view, you can see the construction that's going on. There's the old reliable Chrysler building, but the new buildings going on are dwarfing it. So in spite of the COVID pandemic, New York has a kind of serene beauty to it right now. The streets are eerily quiet. This is a view of a park right next door to us, and the city is in full bloom. There are flowering fruit trees everywhere. Many people are outside walking, most of them masked and keeping a safe distance. This is another shot of a different part of our neighborhood in the Lower East Side, and those giant apparent chocolate kisses are actually barriers that a local artist has decorated to look like chocolate kisses. This is what we typically see. We live a little bit east of Chinatown and Little Italy. This is one of New York's historic delicatessens. It's called Sibylle. It's been in one family for over 100 years, and just before they pretty much shut down to the public, they had put up their Easter chocolate imports. Now, if you want to get food from them, you call in. They will meet you by the back door, put a bag out on the street. It's almost like doing a drug transaction, and you pick it up and take it home. This is one of the other communities here. This is from the very, very Orthodox Jewish community, a beautiful challah bread. And the Lower East Side, by the way, has been the gateway for generation after generation who came in straight from Ellis Island, past the Statue of Liberty, and settled in New York. It has been the home of huge influxes of Irish people. The Italian community, the Jewish community have lived here. And it, at one point, was the densest population of any city in the world. So things have changed radically.
Sorry, that's me, sorry.
With the announcement by our governor, who is, by virtue of his daily announcements, become somewhat of a national figure. And when he put out this statement, things changed abruptly overnight. And the next image really shows you how abruptly. This picture was taken on a train ride to Brooklyn, 25 minutes on the train, and not another person came into the car. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, this has changed dramatically since that point, because now they've eliminated so much service that the few remaining riders are being crowded together completely against the social distancing. And of course, it's the people who are providing all the services, going to work. These are some of our neighbors in our elevator. That's that yellow mask, if you look, has a particularly nice little breathing space there. It's a little puppy dog. This is another one of our neighbors. We live in a city with a large homeless population. This fellow lives outside on a heat grate 1 block away from us. So now let's move on to something I think a little more inspiring. And
let's just bring you over to the...
Moving over to Sibylle's work, because Sibylle's work really deals with love, not in the romantic concept of love, although she and her husband, Stephen Paul Day, have a wonderful, very, very loving relationship. but her work deals with a more profound thing, a love of life, a love of the mysteries of life, a love of children and animals, representative of innocence and the connection to nature is an important image within her work. This is one of her photographs. A lot of her work is reliant on the photographs that she takes and then reinterprets and translates into her artworks. So this is one of the liminal spaces around their home in New Orleans. Sibylle and Stephen live between New Orleans and Germany. Sibylle is from Germany, her mother still lives there, and they go back for part of the year. So she lives in two very different worlds. We selected that quote because it very much reflects Sibylle's work. She sees her work as a chance to mirror what's happening in life and then bring you through her use of mirrors in many of the pieces into the pieces. This is Sibylle in her studio. Her studio, she says, is about, I believe, 800 square feet. Many of the big pieces require a floor space like this to work on. These pieces have imagery on the back as well as on the front, and the large glass pieces require a modular approach where they're made of multiple components. Give you all a chance to read this. This, I think, describes Sibylle's philosophy very eloquently in her own words. Sibylle is a very introspective person. Her work speaks of an interior search, a search for truth, and she is also quite philosophical. There's a sensitivity to her work that is rare no matter what the medium, but in glass, which is such a cool medium in general, it's really unusual to find somebody that can charge it and infuse it with such emotional quality.
And how timely right now to be dealing with isolation.
Exactly.
Yes. This is one of her panthers. And, you know, you'll see in her pieces a repeated use of these necklaces of pearls and beads. Being people who live in New Orleans, Mardi Gras is an integral part of the reality of their life. And one of the things she's fascinated by is how all of these valueless trinkets suddenly become so symbolically important and desirable during Mardi Gras. She said when the floats go by, the children stream after them, you know, people reaching, you know, to pick up these little plastic beads as if they're precious. So this is really symbolic of the change in, you know, these liminal areas that were natural, that are now being highly impacted by the city's expansion, by the industry around the city. And now you see, you know, this peaceful panther sitting there or sleeping within a dreamscape. This is one of her more complex and larger pieces. Kirke, by the way, is an area in Germany. And she said during the summers there as a child, they would spend a great deal of time in the sunflower fields. If you've ever experienced the sunflowers firsthand, you know how impressive they are and almost alive and alert. And as the sun, you know, travels across the sky during the day, they move and reposition themselves. This is late in the season, where the flowers have already gone to seed and the stalks are collapsing and starting the next phase of the cycle of life. And she thinks that, you know, the sunflower particularly symbolizes that in a very obvious way. There you see the child within the field. It's a common image. The child, in this case, is one of Beth Littman's twin daughters. Sibylle uses images of real people in her work.
And this is photography and
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
She'll do a photo, then she'll do a laser print from the photo. The photo would go on the back of the glass, or in some cases, she works with acrylic. Then she also, I mean, she's a very skillful painter. She renders beautifully.
I'm just gonna, while Doug is explaining, I'm just gonna move here. Here you can see how she is doing it. So the enlarged photo, this is a different image. It's actually the piece that became the Great Dismal Swamp, which is now in the collection of the Barry Art Museum. But you can see the image on the bottom. Can everybody see that?
The image of the person?
No, yes.
The image of the person.
There are two
Yeah.
girls here.
Right.
Here and
So
here.
that
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
laid down on the paper. Then she's put the glass on top of it. That's what's
Okay.
reflecting in that.
Okay, call me back later. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to stop just a second and say if you're not on mute, please go to the bottom of your screen with your cursor to the far left side and put yourself on mute unless you want to talk, because we can hear background noise and that is disturbing to the rest of the participants. So if you're getting phone calls, if you have any other kind of shuffling noises in there, then please put yourself on mute. You can always unmute yourself and talk if you want to. Sorry, go ahead, Doug and Katya.
Right, so here we can see that, and here we see how she divided a similar but slightly different image into this piece.
Now she also works on the front of the glass. In this piece, if you look at the lower right-hand corner, you'll see there's a sunflower, a silvery sunflower. There are several of those images repeated throughout the piece. And that is something that has become dimensional by her putting an object, or a sunflower actually, under the glass, then fusing the glass or softening the glass over it. So oftentimes the glass shape is no longer flat, it's irregular. When she works with acrylic, she likes to use the greater thickness of the acrylic to carve deeply into it. Now here, this is the Perca sunflower field. You can see the hawk.
I'm just going to go back here. This is the area we're looking at in the detail here.
See, now often Sibylle pulls parallels and connections between animals and children, feeling that in nature there is this special bond, and both are symbolic of innocence. The hawks in her pieces, and they are repeated sometimes in cast glass pieces or in more two-dimensional works like this, are protectors of the children. And while they look fierce, in this case they're not threatening the child, they're standing to warn anybody else who might bring a threat to the child.
Doug and Katya, how does she take the photo that's in back of the glass and somehow embed it into the glass imagery?
It's not embedded per se. What she'll do is bond it or glue them to the back of the piece. So you're looking through the glass to the piece, to the imagery. And sometimes she alters it. Sometimes there are drawings that are done on the back. There would be painted details on the back. So you do get a sense of depth with these pieces. It's not merely like a framed picture where a piece of glass is laid over them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good example of one of the newest cast pieces with this very tender rendition of a newly born fawn. This is a piece, this is called Pearl Collector. This is one of the pieces that has been done on acrylic. The piece is 22 inches high. Usually she will employ the acrylic panels when she wants to do unbroken images of a larger size, because she does the large glass pieces in a modular fashion. The large pieces of acrylic allow for something that's a more unified image, and it's also thicker, as I mentioned a moment ago. So the beads that you see there in gold and silver are deeply carved into the rear of the panel, and then the metallic foils are applied.
She works basically, she's trying to kind of parallel the processes in the two different materials. And so with the plexiglass, where she doesn't work with heat to form any irregularity of surfaces or background on the plexiglass, she uses carving, but she also uses silvering and other techniques similar to what she uses in the glass. So these images are equally rich, and the pieces are equally rich. This is also a acrylic piece.
Is there depth in these pieces, or are they?
They have depth of at least a 1/4 inch, maybe
Half
3/8
an
of an
inch, it
inch,
says
half
here.
an inch.
So some of the acrylic gets built out, or?
Well, some would be on the front surface, some would be on the back surface. And when she carves, some of it actually appears to be in between.
Right.
You get the impression on many of these pieces that you're peering through a window into a private space, perhaps observing things of happening that's, you know, the person that's active is unaware that you're watching. And they all have this kind of sense of mystery. And as I say, they're almost dreamlike spaces.
The pieces technically are, in a sense, a type of collage, I would say, with, of course, with heat, you know, applied when it's glass. But because those are the flat pieces, she once described it as having 4 surfaces, because she uses, as you saw the photograph laid out flat in that shot of her working in the studio, she uses this tissue paper, which basically is semi-translucent as well. And so she sometimes attaches a little piece of tissue paper on the front, and she would have the tissue paper or the front surface and the back surface of the tissue paper, which becomes more transparent when she applies it to whatever other surface she's using, glass or acrylic, because when you apply the adhesive, it basically makes the paper more translucent. And then she has the back surface, and if she puts tissue paper there, she has 2 surfaces on the tissue paper, the front and the back.
So this is another example of her use of the bird imagery. And this is cast glass. This is from a series she calls Where the Rubies Grow. This is the complete piece underneath the dome.
Yes, and this is a series, obviously, that she's been working on for a little while, but she is very in love with this red glass, and she, in fact, is working towards her next body of work, which is going to be all made of ruby glass and based on the movie The Heart of Glass by Werner Herzog, right, which dealt with the recipe for this ruby glass.
What's the name of that movie again?
Called The Heart of Glass.
The Heart of Glass.
Mm-hmm.
It may just be Heart of Glass, but it's, as all Werner Herzog movies, it's a very troubling and strange film. The full story is there in that film, is that there was this small town that was famous for creating ruby glass. The formula was only known to one person. This was the pre-studio glass times when, you know, keeping the secrets were more important than sharing it. The person who had the formula died, didn't leave the information to anybody. The entire fortunes of the town, you know, were based on this. And it becomes this mad pursuit to try and rediscover the formula. And it does literally drive people mad. It's a very interesting film. Spoiler alert, it's a very troubling film.
We can send you at the end, or we'll send it to Marilee and she can distribute a link to there's a preview of it on YouTube. It's a 1976. It's an older movie, but it deals with, you know, 18th century Bavaria. Doug told you what the story basically is, but it's a really interesting and beautiful. I mean, Werner Herzog, if you've never seen his movies or if you've seen only a few, it's always worth seeing more. They're visually lush and beautiful.
This is a good example of the sense of mystery that so many of the pieces have. You know, the child mostly hidden, just peering from behind all of these pearl necklaces that she's acquired. This again is the glass, using the glass, has the laser print, it's engraved as well. Oftentimes there's silvering techniques that are employed. So there's this almost haunted staring out from the work. Now, everybody acknowledges that Sibylle's work is beautiful, beautiful in the more profound way than pretty, you know, but many people find it troubling. And I think it's fair to say there's a tenderness to her work and a poignancy, but she is not just interested in the surface beauty.
May I ask a quick question?
Of
Sure.
course.
On the beads, are those are the physical beads, and then she silvers them? Is that correct?
No,
No.
no,
The
she,
pictures of the beads.
well, in this case, they may be painted on the surface and they may be silvered on the surface. They're not the actual beads. In
Okay.
the acrylic pieces, they're most often carved into it in relief, reverse relief carving. In this, sometimes she will slump the glass over the beads, and the beads have a dimensional quality, and then she silvers them, so it seems at first glance as if you're looking at an actual bead necklace.
You can see, can you see my cursor, everybody?
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
It, like this strand right here looks to me like it's one of those that Doug is talking about, where it's dimensional and is silvered. You see it kind of as a little mirror, and these individual beads right here, a few of them, the one right here, and then the rest of them are painted.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Doug, the flat pieces, are they one solid piece or are they mounted with the individual panes?
This is two, you see that line in the middle that is bisecting
Yes,
the image, right? That's the space between the panes. Those panes may be 12 inches, perhaps 14 inches. In this case, since it's 21 inches wide, each one of those is 21 inches, but it's only 34 inches high, so it's 17 inches high. They're thin glass, it's like window glass thickness. The edges become irregular because they've been slumped and somewhat cooked in the kiln.
And you can see the mounting device here. It basically mounts to a background
I see.
of the
So
panel.
even the larger pieces are individual frames that are mounted to make one continuous.
You can almost think of it
Correct.
as a mosaic. You know, it's a component of modular tiles that she
Okay,
made.
thank you.
You can see it even better here.
This is 4 different tiles, and this is an example of her use of particular glass. This is dichroic glass, and most of you probably know that's a glass that responds differently to different types of light. The wavelengths in fluorescent light are different than the wavelengths in incandescent light, and the glass literally changes color. So this, seeing it in the green, this is the same piece, a detail of it, but under fluorescent light. And the other is the ginger itself.
Yeah, and you can sort of see this very kind of composition in here, you know, like right here and here and in here. Those are the ginger flowers.
Does she make several versions of the same piece until she gets to exactly the where she wants to be? Because they seem so intricate, it seems hard for me to believe that the first time she does it's exactly the way she wants it to be.
Well,
And it doesn't seem like you can, you know, scratch it out and make new ones.
well, these pieces take long periods of time for development. In answer to the first part of your question, oftentimes there are different versions. Now you're looking at Chifuncta. Chifuncta is an area, it was a prehistoric Indian tribe living in Louisiana. The child in here is the same image as was used in a previous piece in the Perka Fields, and also she's one of Beth's twins that was also used in the Dismal Swamp piece, which is the one that Sibylle is working on that's on the floor. But, you know, this is done stage by stage. She first gets the concept, then she works with the photography, and the images are built very methodically and over a long period of time. But she will do different variations of them. It's not because the previous one failed, but it's because she feels there's enough richness in the theme to keep exploring it.
I'm gonna just do one thing. I'm gonna very quickly go back here to the, if I can quickly do this, to go to where she was working, where she was working on the, give me just 1 second, sorry about that. Where she's working on the piece in the, on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
In 2018, this photo was taken in 2018 when she was working on the in early 2018 when she was working on an exhibition at the Chrysler. She had a solo exhibition at the Chrysler, and I visited her during that time to do just a studio visit because we were representing the work and we had helped set the show up. And so I remember that what happened here was she enlarged the image of the swamp, which is kind of the big image that you see. But of course, the girls, the figures, were not in there, nor are many of the other details that you, for example, saw on the Chifuncta piece. So what she does there is she actually creates images, those images, she then has them cut out. She has cutouts, and she can position them wherever she feels is right. So to the question about, does this work the first time? Before she does anything with the glass, she first composes the image on paper, essentially. And that allows her some level of flexibility, improvisation, whatever you want to call it. And then she also we have known her to re-slump certain pieces several times in order to get the effect that she wanted. So for example, all the rope down here and the branches up here, like this whole piece here, this piece here, all of this, those are dimensional. And you can see where she, looks at the image, and then when she's working, she kind of outlines that for herself, because that's also going to be cut away from the paper itself, so that she has the room there to slump, and the paper doesn't have to go into that slumped area because that's going to be silvered. So it's a fairly complex process.
It's a very complex, methodical process. Now, when Katya says they're dimensional, they are, the glass has been slumped over three-dimensional forms. It's nothing that's been added to the front, but, then she emphasizes that with the silvering.
And so let's also remember that in order to do that, she can't just take a branch because that will burn. She makes a model of the branch out of plaster or clay and then plaster, and that's how she can slump it. So there's a huge amount of work and thought that goes into the composition and then into the making of the piece.
And this piece is in the exhibition and is not in a museum someplace, right? Or
this piece is in the exhibition.
This is in the exhibition. Okay.
I was just counting. That's 48 separate squares.
Exactly.
I mean, it's amazing. It's crazy.
So here are some details from that piece, so you can see it a little bit more closely. Here you can kind of see how she deals with the branches and the three-dimensionality. Maybe it's the rope, but where it's cut off kind of. And so the slumped edge of that glass meets the other slumped edge of the glass. Again, these are, small details, but that take
a lot of thought. Now, I mentioned repeated use of the third.
Okay.
Sorry, was there a question?
No, someone's talking.
Okay.
I'm muting people, but they keep unmuting themselves. So
Katya's been looking for a mute button for me for years. So the fox is another animal that she uses repeatedly. And one of the reasons is because foxes are adaptable enough that they come into urban areas. She has used them three-dimensionally. We've had pieces that had baby foxes nestling amongst themselves. The hawk is another one. I mean, we're showing pictures of our buildings. We have resident hawks around here, red-tailed hawks that are just brilliant to watch as they fly. The city is like man-made mountains and craggy hills, perfect for hunting birds. This is a good detail of Chifuncta.
Again, that's one of Beth's girls. And, I think that one of the beautiful things about Sibylle herself and about her work is that, she kind of winds reality with a fictional narrative.
But looking for truth.
Right. And she of course, one of the things, she's very close friends with Beth Lipman. And when Beth gave birth to her twin girls, Sibylle was like right there, so she has known these girls since they were babies, and she has watched them grow up, and she has photographs of them from every stage of their childhood that she has utilized in her work.
And just as a footnote, when they were born extremely premature, the girls, you could hold each girl in your hand. That's how small they were. If this had been 10 years earlier, they definitely would not have survived. But they've been thriving, and they're doing very well now. But it was truly, it was the miracle of birth married to the miracle of modern medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Doug and Katya, what are the rope work is incredibly detailed.
It's amazing, right? Whoops, sorry,
Yeah.
I just lost that. Let me go back there.
It's
Mhm.
almost
Yeah.
it's almost snake-like.
Exactly. So she uses. So
What's her narrative there with the ropes, the symbolism of the ropes here?
I actually haven't spoken to her about that, but I am just surmising part of it is, just the kind of working side of the river and the kind of.
You see in some of the pieces the way the
nautical.
debris of industry is washed up into nature. And quite likely, given the seafaring quality of what goes on there and the interaction of the port with New Orleans, that's part of it. She sent us some working photographs that had palms growing out of the muck and completely surrounded by industrial detritus. And right behind them, there were ships, commercial freight ships. So this is part of this. She's right on the borderline of industry and nature. And in New Orleans, the two of them, while you could almost say they're at war with each other, they've created a third reality between the two of them.
And she has always sought these things. The previous show that we had of hers in 2015 was called The Land Behind. And it was something that she said she remembered from her childhood growing up outside of Düsseldorf in a very industrial area where, she said they used those areas to kind of play, right? Because that's where children ran, and nobody worried at the time to let their children run there. So she said that it was in those areas, kind of these undefined peripheral lands, like a no man's land that she kind of grew up, and so this is kind of that version in where she is now in Louisiana.
It's nature, but it's no longer innocent.
Mm-hmm.
These are a series of small pieces. I think they're 11 inches square, and each one is autonomous. She shows them as 10 inches square. She shows them in the group, but they are not necessarily related thematically, except in the overall larger sense of what her practice always tries to express. This is a offshoot of a project that she, Stephen, and several other artists had been involved with a German gallerist over a number of years, where they would go to dinners and then everybody would draw on the napkins and paint on the napkins, and they would save them. They were really works of art, but on the most modest of surfaces. These have the images trapped under glass. So this is and these would typically individually be displayed on little shelves that she has. There's another group that we can show you. The texts are very interesting. It's, in some cases, they're almost like haiku that speak about them. And some of the images, the one in this case, the one in the upper left, is a good example of what fired her initial interest in working with children. She found old medical books that had focused on children's ailments, and very often, you could see they were slightly misshapen. They had, been impacted physically by the disease or the birth disorder that had occurred. And she said that they were only in the books because they were objects, for study and curiosity. She got this tremendous need to do something healing for them and
to liberate them.
And to liberate them from strictly being, in that kind of imprisonment. So these are seen as healing pieces, and that's an ongoing theme.
I don't know if you can read, but for example, this piece, it says, "But they didn't believe I was a bird." So it's this wish, of a child, or the pretend, what they're pretending, yeah.
This is her very latest piece. The reason it's partially edited on the left and bottom is because there was so much incrustation of mold material. She hadn't had the time to get it all off, but it's a beautiful three-dimensional depiction of the panther that you saw in the earlier piece that was called Backwater.
Video. Sure.
What's the size of that?
Oh, sorry. Let's go back. Panther.
No, it's
it's
right
there.
there.
Apologize.
That's 28 inches wide. It's a 14-inch deep and or 14-inch high, and I think 22 inches deep. It's, for her, that pushes the limits pretty much of her castings in a single casting. Although she's done pieces, and Tim's very familiar, of course, with one that's called Snow Child, which is a life-size child sleeping, surrounded by protecting hawks, done in a beautiful white glass that's very large, but it's done in components. And here's a little background on Sibylle's studies. You'll notice not only did she study glass, but she has a degree in painting and sculpture. I think she really is one of the artists that epitomizes the concept of somebody who uses glass because it's the appropriate material for certain expression of a certain idea. She'll move to the acrylic in other cases. In other cases, it's just the imagery itself. She's not a prisoner of the material, but she uses it with great eloquence. This is a different fawn from the other one.
Yeah, she very often makes things in pairs. You will see there's a pair of the fawns in the, I don't know if you remember, but in the bird pieces, this piece here where the rubies grow, there's a pair of birds. She loves the idea of the duality of two, and that was part of what also very much kind of fascinated her, other than just the pure love and friendship with Beth's girls, that they were identical twins. And
she's done a lot of pieces of castings of busts of children and linked them. And part of it is that twins have, as many of us know who have any twins in the family, a special private level of communication between the two of them that transcends the normal levels that we're all familiar with.
And Sibylle really loves this idea of this mysticism that kind of also surrounds this idea of the language, secret communication, these forgotten or kind of by way back places. If you've read Thomas Mann or watched Herzog's movies or another German director, Wim Wenders, they very much work in the same vein. You can see that obviously Thomas Mann much earlier generation, but Wim Wenders pretty much Sibylle's generation. They are all working kind of with the same ideas that they grew up with, these German ideas, or ideas that were taught in German schools, about nature, about our relationship with nature, and all that. Anyway, that I think
that's the end of the exhibition. While we are terribly frustrated not to be able to mount it where people can come and see it physically, I will say that we will be bringing pieces in the future to some of the art fairs we do. And I'm also happy to say that even though the exhibition only went online, I think yesterday, we have commitments on several pieces already. Sibylle is really a unique voice in the glass community and in the greater creative art community, and people watch her work and wait for her work. So it's really a privilege to show an artist with this degree of integrity, talent. It's one of the things that makes having a gallery worthwhile. So
even a virtual gallery.
Even a virtual gallery. And for many years, when the internet first became popular, and of course the gallery predates the internet, and people would tell us about, you need to put this online, I would always say, experiencing art is an actual, not a virtual experience. And there is a difference. I mean, seeing a good photograph of a piece is one thing, but when you're in the presence of the piece, there's something that an artist, a talented artist, invests into the work that somehow remains with the work. Before I was involved with contemporary work, I was a collector of ancient work, pre-Columbian work. I used to love the old ancient Roman coins. And to pick up something that was made by hand 1,000, 2,000 years ago, and to still sense this level of communication between the maker and the viewer, there's something truly magical about it.
So just through the miracle of technology, we disabled Doug's text here, but I got a text on my screen, which we have open here that you can't actually see, but we can. And we just got a text from Sibylle, which says, is the Zoom meeting with the AACG working? If so, please say hello from me to everybody who joined. Sibylle.
She's here in
That
spirit.
was nice.
Hello back to Sibylle.
Yeah, that
Well,
was nice.
Thank you all very, very much, Katya and Doug. Does anyone have any further questions of Katya and Doug? Because we have a few more minutes left, and if you would like to see something else, I have a couple of options.
And we just have one more plug to make. If
Okay.
anyone's interested in a checklist, price list, we have them available. And
Hold on
just
just a second,
email
sorry,
us
I'm
at
just trying to-
either at my email, douglas@hellergallery.com, or at info, or you can call, and we'd be happy to provide that. The prices range, just for informational purposes, from the smallest pieces, $1,800, up to the largest, most complex, which top out at almost $50,000.
Are you going to, when all this is over, have another show of hers?
Well, we've worked with Sibylle for many years, and we certainly will have another show of hers. The most likely thing, because already pieces are spoken for and will be going to private collections, is that
okay.
remaining from this will be taken to art fairs. One of the great advantages at the fairs, of course, is in a series of 3 or 4 days, anywhere from 30 to, in the case of Art Miami, 80,000 people can get the opportunity to view the work. And it's wonderful to see it firsthand.
Yeah, that's, a lot of the pieces are difficult to really get the full impact of it just on a, I'm on a little computer, whereas
Well, that speaks
you don't get that depth.
the primary experience viewing art.
Right.
So especially as you note the large pieces, because some of these are 8 inches across. They're very impressive, but never overwhelming. Although sometimes the amount of detail is startling, because
I find that when you have one of her pieces, that you're always finding something new. As many times as I look at it, I say to myself, oh, I never saw that little bug or little something before. It makes it really interesting and exciting to have a piece, to look at.
Well, it really lets you realize how much she's focused on this and how much every little detail is meaningful to her.
Yeah.
So
that's why we also try to show some of the details of the larger pieces, because we understand that it's difficult to see that detail that you're talking about,
Right.
In there, but there's a limit to what you can do with images, obviously.
I can't wait to see the Panther. That looks spectacular.
Yeah. Panther is
right.
God almighty.
Yeah.
okay. Well, all I can say again is thank you very much, and thank you, Marilee. And
Thank you, Doug.
see you all.
Thanks, Doug.
And thank you. I'm curious to see how many new members we got from insisting that they join AACG to come to this preview. So
Well, that's
Hi.
Hey, guys.
It's nice to see everybody, too.
it is. We had a couple of other requests today. We actually are going to have Tim Tate do a walkthrough. We send out not today, next Friday. Next Friday.
Thank God. All right.
I didn't want to scare you. Next Friday. Because we did a questionnaire for the AACG members, and people submitted thoughts about pieces that bring them joy. And Tim has that exhibit. It goes live right after the next AACG meetup, which is next of Friday, the 10th.
And
And then I see Leslie Jeniger joined us. And Michaela, hello, how are you? And if Venice opens up so she can get back into her shop, then on the 24th, I believe it is, Leslie's going to treat us to a trunk show, which I think will be fun. So
walk you around Venice.
that would be nice as well. Leslie was kind enough this week to, Leslie and her son, to show my grandchildren views from her rooftop in Venice, and we'd been, anyway, so that was a special thrill. Thank you, since we can't be there. And Aaron had suggested that we might want to take a look at some of the Paul Stankard slides. Aaron, are you prepared to show us any of that now? We have about 10 more minutes. Would you want to take that time?
So it's not Paul Stankard. There is a Paul Stankard studio tour, which I'll be sharing soon.
Ah, okay, sorry.
But what I have is a small glimpse into the secondary show we had scheduled for the International, which will go online in May, called Silver. And it's a glimpse into the future of glass. And I'll just briefly show you guys this exhibition. This is completely different from what Doug did. These artists are all brand new, but they came highly recommended from other artists. And so, the idea is going to be, I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts, because this is going to be very interesting to hear what your ideas are concerning this work. So a lot of these artists, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. A lot of these artists are really, really green, but they have the potential of being very, very interesting in the future. Let me get rid of this. So I'm just going to kind of peruse through these artists, and if you feel like sharing or telling me your thoughts about them, because they're all highly recommended by well-known artists. I contacted about 28 of them in August and asked them, who's going to be a force in the future? Who's going to be the next generation of glass artists we should be looking at?
Can you tell us not only the artist, but the artist who recommended this artist?
I can't do it during the slideshow, but it will be part of our exhibition information when it goes up. I don't have that in front of me. This is too raw. I barely got the images organized, but I want to take you through. I can tell you this is Terry Bailey, and she was recommended by Tim Tate. And I saw her stuff in one of the side shows during Art Miami, and it was very impressive work. And I wanted to show you these pieces, because you're going to see these artists in the future. This is a woman named I can't remember her, Bree Chesler. This one was recommended by Laura Donifer.
Wow.
Yes.
Look at that.
How big is that, Aaron?
I think it's about 18 inches tall. Very, very, very interesting stuff. Very cool stuff. Tammy Coatsworth. She's been around for a while. Her new stuff. It took me a while to convince her to show this. She had this in her studio. She was just messing around. I thought it was beautiful.
Oh, wow.
It is beautiful.
It is beautiful.
This is a woman named Esperson from, I believe, Sweden.
Who's that?
18 inches
Sweden. Esperson.
Esperson. And she's very, very exciting and going to be really, really cool for the future.
Looks like candy.
It does look like candy. And they sell pretty well in Europe, but no one's really seen them here. This is Sean Fairweather. Beautiful work.
Beautiful work.
Many of you on social media know Hannah Gibson.
I like that.
Very interesting.
This is someone named Goss. I can't tell you what it is, but I think it's panel work, but I haven't seen it in person yet to really figure it out.
Huh.
This is Tomas Helvichka's daughter, Petra Herbakova.
Wow. That's third generation.
Yep. Someone named Johnson. Very peaceful.
Fabulous.
Beautiful pieces. This is Karodi. So these change as you walk around.
Susanna Karodi?
I believe so.
Is she married to Another artist?
Don't like it.
Hmm?
I like it and I
see.
don't like it.
All right.
I
one-
think,
Yes.
I think Rick and I saw her work in Budapest.
Yep. Zuzana Karodi, that's it.
Yeah, it's fabulous work. I've not
Yep. She's
seen
Hungarian.
it shown here. Good.
Love her stuff. There's Zuzana Kubakova. We weren't at the gallery because of what's going on, and I had to send my associate to FedEx to pick these
Great exhibit.
from FedEx. Laputa, beautiful
Buying the
forms.
tickets for there and see
Oh, great idea.
Fabulous.
This is Lakata using glass.
Oh,
Differently.
I know him from a long time ago.
Was that, I mean, he's a Philadelphia guy, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, he used to just do necklaces. I had him in the National Liberty Museum auction. He's really dedicated to this linkage. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I thought this was different. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
This is someone named Lo, very poppy kind of artwork.
Hello, Kitty.
Yeah.
Is that a Japanese artist?
She is Asian. I think she lives in America. That's all I got so far.
That's so cute.
This is Tom Marino. These are actually porcelain with clay and glazes on top. He is a local artist out of Ohio, and they're very inexpensive, but they are just stunning. Masquerade, is that how you pronounce it, Tim?
James Maskery. He's out of the National Glass Center in Sunderland, England.
Oh, I like that.
That's unbelievable.
Is that Natalie?
Nadia, I believe.
Nadia? Who is that?
Nado.
No, thank you.
Nado, thank you.
Oh, wow.
I think we met her at the Northlands Glass.
Mhm. Yeah, I think she's the person who was there with Stephen.
With Stephen Paul. Yeah, Rick. Yes, Rick and I were there when we traveled recently.
Mhm.
She was highly recommended by somebody. I can't remember who. Oh, we got my battery dying, of course. Almost done here. Kit Paulson's work.
You scared me. I thought it was my battery running low.
Right.
Part of the panic there, Aaron.
All right. Kit Paulson's phone.
Look at that. Ooh.
Whoa. Who is this?
She's the resident glass artist at
Kit.
Penguin.
Her name is Kit Paulson.
Kit Paulson.
Mhm.
Resident glass artist where?
Finland.
At Penland.
Oh, at Penland, of course.
She was recommended by Kate Vogel and John Littleton, though we've shown her before, but she fits well into the show.
Mhm. And she studied in Illinois.
Rawlinson, I believe Timothy.
Mhm.
Wow.
Well done work.
Whoa.
Juliet and Robert and Rogers, they always make such fun.
Oh, from the Chrysler Museum, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
You look inside this head, you can see this.
They always are so humorous.
Look newer. Your kayaker deep inside the head.
Still, one of my favorite glass shows ever was his MFA show.
Well, if anyone has pictures of it, we can show it.
I know right now, but ask Robin for it.
I will. I'll do that. He's going to do a show for AACG soon.
Yeah.
Of the Dan Davy exhibit that's we were supposed to see when we were there. This month, right? We're in April already.
April.
Who is this?
This is Dudley Stern. Very fun.
I think it's Austin Stern.
Oh, sorry, you're right. Austin Stern.
Austin Stern was in New Glass now, right? He's in Seattle. Is that the same?
Yep. They are stunning. Fun what works. And then Ethan Stern. He's sending in some clear pieces. He's managing a new studio in California.
Wow.
That's new for him.
Yeah.
Those are beautiful. And then this is a husband and wife, or not husband, a couple, some sort that work together. Thompson and something. Really should learn these names better. Hannah Emmark and Lewis Thompson.
Are they in from Canada?
I don't. It's possible. I don't quite know. They made the second.
Yeah, I think I
these
know.
fruit pieces.
I love it.
Tim Rawlinson are in Peter Layton's studio in London. They work
Thank
part
you.
with them.
Oh,
Certainly, Louis Thompson does, and so does Tim Rawlinson.
Thank you,
And
Mark.
that is the end of the show. Hope you guys.
Well, and it's 1:58, so that's sort of the end of our hour of AACG eye candy for the week.
thank you. Thank you
So,
very much.
Thank you all so much. Doug and Katya, thank you again so very much. That was really beautiful and perfect for the times.
Thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Stay well, stay
Mary,
healthy.
may I ask you one question?
You may, Ellen.
Are you sitting in front of a quilt?
I am sitting in front of a quilt by Denise Mucci Furnish, who takes old quilts and instead of throwing them away, gel sews them and paints them.
Beautiful.
And it was my very first purchase of real art.
Huh?
Many, many years ago, but her first sale of real art too. So
beautiful.
Very nice.
Thank you all very, very much. Everybody stay safe.
Everybody.
Stay
Thank
healthy.
you very much.
Wonderful to see you. Thanks for joining.
Everybody keep well. Keep well and keep safe.
Right.
Maybe we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thanks
Bye.
again.
Stay home.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.